So good afternoon. Nice to see some familiar faces and quite a few new ones as well. Hello there. My name's Darren, Deejeo. I've been speaking and teaching for about 15, 16 years now on a range of different subjects, from ancestral connection, gender, relationships, sound, language, all sorts of stuff. I've done a few of them here at Shine seminars, and they seem to be received well. And Eli put me down for this one, which I thought he was brave with the subject, to be honest, and the theme. I thought he was brave, but he pulled it off. Fair play to him. But I thought, how do I want to honour this theme when really some of my introductory gender stuff I've already done with a lot of you guys? And fair enough, for the new people it would be new, it would be a repeat for the rest of you. So I thought, what could I do that would tie together with what we've done before, but also take us a bit further in our understanding of our journey as being a human being, really, whether we are man or woman. And so today is actually a talk that I've not done in probably about 10 years, if not more. But it's actually my favourite subject. And so it's a real pleasure to bring it back out again and see how well it goes down with you guys. So it ties in with the theme that he put me down for, which is about ancestral awakening and ancestral connection. And it also ties in with the theme of the divine masculine, which hopefully you'll see as we go along. But I'm feeling tested today. I'm very tired. I've only got a few hours sleep and then drove like 5 hours to get here. So I'm glad to be here. But if I lose my thread, I may test you all, say what was I talking about a minute ago? Just because I'm tired. So we'll see how we go. What's up? I'll stand back. All right. I've got my eldest with me today. That's why I'm not doing an overnighter. Normally I would break up the trip, come overnight, but I've got my oldest with me. So she is today's camera person. Thank you, director. Director Anna over there. So today is both a simple and easy subject and topic, but it's also difficult. And it's difficult because of how deeply rooted in our psyche today's subject is. Like, even to bring up the subject of the divine masculine touches many wounds in all of us to do with our experience with men, the masculine, and the so-called divine masculine, its presence or its perceived absence. And so I know whenever there's a topic like this coming up, it's testing, it's challenging. Numbers always reflect how testing is for people, how many issues people have around it. And I see that reflected here today based on the numbers I've seen before. And I'm not saying that we have lower numbers today because of the topic, but to me, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. And it's not about taking it personally, it's just a sign to me of how deep and pervasive this wound is. You know, how insidious and how unseen and unspoken. And I spoke a little bit about it at the previous Green Heart session. But today we're going to put a different angle on it, you know, a slightly different angle, and see how we get on. And during the process, we're going to be looking a bit more at spelling. So many of you know that I like to talk about how we spell all our words, because all our words are spells. And I'll get into that in a moment as to really what I mean by that, so that you all know whether that fits for you or not as well. And then really, today's subject is going on to some of the biggest spells in our language, which are really about the things which have the biggest effect on our mind and our sense of being, our sense of safety, our sense of righteousness, both in the world and in our bodies, be we man or woman. But before we can get to those big spells, we have to kind of have a look at what I mean by spelling, how it works, what's going on in our heads when we believe things or not believe things that people tell us. And through that process, really what we're looking at doing today is, so in the past we've looked at ancestral connection with sort of the human ancestor. Human ancestors is what we've looked at before. But today we're going to go older. We're going to go further back to some of the oldest ancestral connection that is possible for us, which is with the animal ancestor, which is a great missing piece of our sense of place in the world. You know, we've kind of, we'll get into a bit about how we've got this weird idea in our mind of who and what we are, and that really affects our ability to be at ease in the world, in our bodies, and with and as ourselves, really. So, First of all, let's look at spelling. So, is that a new concept to anybody here about we spell our words because they're all spells? Okay, so I want to unpack what I mean by a spell first, because it could mean all sorts of things, you know. I don't mean thunderbolts and lightning coming down from the sky when somebody says a word. What I mean is a word or phrase of magical effect. That's it. A word or phrase of magical effect. Is that agreeable? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, an agreeable term? All right. So, in many recent years, I mean, when I used to speak this talk, it was recent years. It's a bit longer ago now, because when I first started doing this, it was around the time of things like the Da Vinci Code and all sorts of, you know, the Gnostic Gospels and things like that coming out. And there was all this quest for enlightenment and revelation from ancient scrolls and tablets, as if these could contain some mysterious unlocking that could lead to a freedom of mind and a breakthrough in connection in some way. But that could never happen from these documents or tablets or any of it. But the reason it couldn't happen isn't because of the content. It's because those triangles and squiggles and shapes that are on those tablets and bits of paper have no effect on you whatsoever. No effect. So I could have the most profound tablets on the wall out there that could contain within them the keys to ultimate enlightenment, if you could but read them. You walk right past them unfazed. But now you imagine you've been out walking all day, you've not seen a human being anywhere, you're enjoying the trees and the animals and all the rest of it, and you're drifting away in your thoughts, feeling at home on the land, whatever else. And then all of a sudden you come to a sign, and it's got some squiggles on it. But one of them is, and normally I'd have a whiteboard here, but I don't have it, so I'm just going to have to say what they are. So there'll be an S, a T, an O, and a P. But all they are is squiggles. No different to what's on the stone tablets. No different. But how many of you could walk past that without it having an effect? That's what I mean by a word or phrase of magical effect. There you are, divine, amazing, autonomous, independent, individual being, enjoying your time in your habitat, wandering around in the world, and all of a sudden a couple of squiggles make you stop in your tracks, doubt yourself, look around. Can I? 4 little squiggles. The keys to our emancipation and enlightenment is about unlocking those characters and sigils and how they affect us. Because they're the ones that when it drops through the door and it's got some red writing on it, and you're like, oh, sinking feeling. Do I even want to open it? These are spells dropping through your door. Look at the effect it has on you, changing your state, changing your sense of confidence, your sense of all rightness and ease in the world, from a couple of squiggles on a bit of paper. It's incredibly powerful, but more so, even more pervasive, even more insidious. I'm willing to bet all my insignificant resources that everybody here, to some degree or another, thinks less of themselves than they should and treats themselves less than they should as a result of something somebody said to them a long time ago. Somebody said something to you once, maybe a couple of times. You believed it. And then you repeated it. How many times? Somebody said something to you once, and you whipped yourself with it 10,000 times. There you are. If we look at every human child, every single one of them, as long as they're reasonably well welcomed into the world for their first couple of years in life, you will see a tenacious, vivacious, curious, vibrant being charging about the world, pursuing its own interests. Every one of you were probably in that boat until some spells landed. And then all of a sudden, that bright, vivacious being that you were started to change how you moved in the world. Now, so let's look at what happens in the body when somebody says things to you. So when somebody says horrible things to you, What happens in your body? How do you react? What's going on? What happens? Do you take in a deep breath and go, yes? No. Do you start to want to take up less space, don't you? Constrict, change your posture, all sorts of stuff, withdraw. As a young child, you might want to disappear, which is what starts to manifest as the breaking of our own posture. And for the vast majority of people, any issues with posture, long-term spelling effect weighing you down. Anything that's stopping you from being like, yes, in the world, at home, in my body, yes, at home. Anything in the way of that, virtually guaranteed, it's some form of, if it wasn't physical abuse, it was some kind of spelling that you internalized. That's what I mean by a magical effect. That somebody can say something once, and you can be cowed for decades. And I have some people in my mentoring who are significantly older than I am, and they're just coming to terms with the fact that they have great chunks of their life unlived. Life unlived. Joy unfelt as a result of taking on board something somebody said to them once or twice.
And that's one person out of 7 million people.
One person.
One person.
And how many examples of being spoken to in unwelcoming ways have you all experienced to get to the situation that we're in now? That's what I mean by the importance of spelling. And the evidence is in cymatics and in Masaru Emoto's work and in other things, is the science is proven, and that is that water and matter changes shape in relation to the sound vibrations directed towards it. Science is there. Changes shape. And if they are positive, balanced, harmonious vibrations, then the patterns and the shapes that result are harmonious and balanced. If they are imbalanced, harsh, critical, damaging vibrations, then the effect on the structure of the matter is damaging. Or distorted is what happens in cymatics. You get distorted patterns in matter. How much of your body is water? Yeah. And how do you speak to yourself? How do you speak to yourself? Good to hear. I wish that for everybody here, that they can speak to themselves with love. Because in a way, we've got some undoing to do in terms of that spelling situation. And the thing is, in a way, there's always going to be things in life that are going to make you want to crumple at times. But if they're the only ones that you let yourself feel, if you never let yourself feel the warm feelings and the good feelings, if you never allow yourself, how many people here don't let themselves receive a compliment? How many of them brush it off? Okay? Oh, no, that's fine. What one is actually doing there is deflecting the reception of that spell to prevent you from feeling the good feeling that comes from it. Because there's a part of us that feels like we don't deserve it. And we're used to this negative feeling and feel like that's what we deserve. But it means that we never get the balance in life. We only allow ourselves to experience the crumple zones, and we don't let us get the warmth to go with it. Because let's look at other spells. How does it feel when somebody says to you, "You look so good today in that, you know? Thank you so much for your help today. I couldn't have done it without you." What happens in the body then? Really do start to be like, yeah, I start to feel, I can take up space, breathe a bit more deeply, take a bit more room, posture starts to sort itself. This is spelling effect.
And also when you receive that compliment, you are negating the person who gave it to you.
Exactly.
And you're bringing them back down.
Yeah, absolutely. You're interfering with really a gift, with an offer, an effervescent offering of generosity and goodwill. And we volitionally stop ourselves from experiencing it. And it's like, wow, that's some active spelling on my own part to not allow myself good feeling. Now that's a mental pickle to put yourself in.
Yeah.
How many of us are in it? It's huge. It's huge. Of course. Well, that's a very good point, and thank you for it, because we have many layers, and we're able to connect on many layers with other human beings and receive on many layers of depth. And sometimes, and in fact, one of the topics we're going to get onto today is at a very, very deep existential level, there's a deep wound between the connection between human beings, one of distrust. And that is not feeling safe to be in the true vulnerable tenderness of our honesty and what we like and love, for fear that it will be used against us or shamed or scorned or something like that. So there's a little part that's like holding on to that. Be like, yeah, I'll accept that compliment, but I won't let it touch there because I'm not quite sure I can trust it. And so I don't want to let that flush of good feeling go through me for fear that it's going to be taken away in the next moment. But that fear stops us from having those little pops that help balance the crumples. Do you know what I mean? So let yourself receive it, and if it only goes 25% deep, then good. If it can get 50% deep, then better. If you can let it all the way in and have a moment of warm joy, then great. But let it in. And believe that you do deserve it, and somebody is offering it to you because they want to give it to you. That means they want you to have a good feeling. And if there's a part of you that has, every time somebody says something critical to you, you accept it and revalidate it in your mind, how about working on the other team for a while? Work for the other team for a while. And when somebody says something good, how about taking that on board? Maybe repeating that to yourself a few times. Hey, you said I was really good in that today. Yeah, say it a few times. But if you would do it for one, why not the other? There's a huge issue there. I mean, I really mean it. Look at that. The fact that there's a part of you that feels like, oh no, I couldn't do that with a positive compliment. But how many of you do it with a negative? I mean, where does that leave us in terms of our internal logic? How can one look at that and say that that's a reasonable thing to do to oneself? Bonkers. So say good things to yourself. It's not bonkers to do so. And neither is it egotistical. It's actually a conscious act of reversion and healing once you start to realize that the reason you might be stomping about like this is because you've accepted so many spells which are wrong, that would make you doubt your right to be and your worth and your sense of having a value and a role and a function in life. If you've got any doubts about any of those things, then there's some spells got into you. And it's going to take some work to undo it. And most of the work that has been going on in our lives and for the last few generations has really been a lot about physical and emotional healing, emotional awareness, and a lot of spiritual connection related stuff. But the mind often gets left out. The mind usually gets left out. How many of you have been to an event where they say, come in and just surrender to the process and leave your mind outside? And I'm like, that's great, but as soon as you get back out there, guess what? It's back! Doing its thing. This work is about getting into the mind. Because we now have the awareness and the capacity to see what it's doing and go, oh. How many of you, when you start to become aware of your own emotional reactivity and how damaging it could be, how many of you had a moment of shock? I can't believe that I was actually doing that. In a way, this is us just starting to come into that in the mental realm. I can't believe I was speaking to myself like that. I can't believe I believed those people and took it in, and then I reran that program 10 million times, and they said it once. Even if I don't know how to stop that, it seems like a worthwhile thing to turn some attention to, doesn't it? It's like learning that you've been going through life with an invisible limb that's been doing this your whole life, and then going, whoa, I've just become aware this is happening. How do I make you stop? I don't know yet, but you're in my zone now, and I'm not going to let that go. If that's the least you get out of today, then that's worthwhile as far as I'm concerned. Just to be able to get a little bit of mental insight to see what's going on here. Because the mind is the same as the rest of our aspects, our bodies, you know, which is, if you look at a human infant, when it first turns up in the world, it's kicking and it's spasming, you know, arms and legs are kicking everywhere, it's got no skill. But within about a year or two, it can walk and talk and be understood. And nobody shows you what you do with a leg muscle. Nobody shows you what you do with a voice box. You just saw people walking and talking and flung your limbs around until it started to happen. And you started to make some sounds until they started to be recognised. You know, and I don't know, you put your hand up for me? Put your hand up, everyone. And if you put it down, how many of you can tell me how you did that? How did you do that? How do you make sounds that are understood? What are you doing with your voice box? Anybody here know? No, you don't know. But it doesn't stop you from doing it. Communication is the result. But as in, how do you make your voice box move in a way that's understood? I've got no idea either. But it doesn't mean I don't know how my car engine works, doesn't mean I can't drive it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, our emotions do the same as our physical body did at puberty. And it starts to lash out and kick out and all the rest of it. And the mind is no different. It spasms and it lashes until we start to witness, oh, you're flapping about and doing this and you're hurting me and you're hurting them. Oh, this is a bit of a pickle. What do we do about this? And that's the journey, for me, that's the beginning of the journey to self-mastery. Where we can appraise how our energies are moving by themselves and then go, whoa, what can I do about that? But if we try and stifle and suppress our natural energies and movements, that's not healthy. What I'm talking about is the movement to healthy and skillful expression and containment, not suppression and repression and non-movement, which I think most of us have had enough of in their lives. You know, exactly that. We've got to kind of give ourselves the permission to be in a beginner space, let things flap about a bit, because that's the only way to get forward. In fact, that's perfect time to move on to the next sort of section, because giving yourself permission to flap about a bit is exactly what the theme of this talk is going to get us to. We keep track of the time. Okay. So, one last thing on spells before we start to get into the really powerful spells. And that is about understanding how they work. So, we share physical space because I can see it. And we made an appointment to be here at this time, and I can test whether we share physical space by saying, are you here? Yeah. Give it a pinch. Right. Validated. Shared space. Yeah? We share the space. We can agree that we're each here. But we don't share emotional space in the same way. You know, because what's going on inside for me isn't the same as what's going on inside for you. And you can be influenced by my feeling if you're around it too much. Anyone who's lived with somebody in a mood knows that. Yeah? Ever been with someone in a mood? How long does it take to drag you down? If you can get some space in there, you'll be all right, but otherwise that miasma will get you. Yeah? So there's elements of shared overlap there. But what a lot of people don't realise is we genuinely share mental space. Mental space is something we actually share. And it's something that we feel when it's shared. So, we all navigate mental, emotional, and physical space every day. And they're distinct realms. For most of you, it's operating in what's called the pre-conscious, which is you're not aware when you're doing it. But you all do it. So have any of you ever found yourselves, when you are listening intently to somebody, that your gaze softens and the things in the space are blurring around you a little, and you're kind of going, yeah, I'm with you. Have you ever found yourself doing that? Mm-hmm. That's when we're navigating that space. Physical space, what's going on physically, becomes less important. You're not paying any attention to it really, but instead there's another part of your awareness that's intently focused on following the point. And we have some really interesting phrases that indicate our awareness of this. I can see your perspective on that subject, but I have a different point of view on that matter. I can't see where you are going with this. Yeah, I kind of get your point. These things all indicate shared spatial awareness, location, direction, and an awareness of whether somebody knows what they're talking about or not. Because you can feel when somebody's stabbing in the dark compared to somebody who knows what they're talking about. Someone speaking from understanding compared to somebody just having a pop, chucking some spells out and hoping they land. And the difference is meaning. Meaning is really interesting because it's a word that everybody uses, but very few know what it means. How do you define meaning? What is the meaning of meaning? And it's through the spelling understanding that we can start to get it. It's a bit like maths. So what's the mean in maths? The average. So what's happening is when we are casting our spells, trying to make a point. So we're always trying to point something out with a spell. Buddha used to say that. Buddha would say words were signposts. We're always pointing something out. You know, if I want to draw your attention to the drink, the podium, the floor, the wall, I can say those words, or I can go. If you're a human being anywhere in the world that is mentally well, what am I referring to right now? Does it matter what language you speak? Are you going to know what I'm on about? Yes, because we use words to point things out. Now, that's all well and good when we're talking about physical things, because if I don't know the word for something, I can just walk up to it. Someone put their guards on. I love it. There's nobody at the door. It's all right. If you don't know the word for it, then you can go and point it out. And this is actually what causes most people problems in their teens. So M. Scott Peck, very famous psychiatrist, talks in his role as a psychiatrist is that he helps people come to terms with their feeling, where the term is the name. To help you come to terms with your feeling. Do you know what it's called? How do you feel today? Don't know. You ever felt that? How do you feel? Don't know.
Yeah.
You haven't come to terms with that feeling. Do you have a name for it yet? So, when we are pointing things out, physically we've got support. But even if I don't know the term for my feeling, we have a built-in pointing mechanism that can help you know how I feel, despite what I say. What is it? What can tell you how I feel, regardless of what I say? That's it, face. Yeah, your face. So, you can walk in to a space and somebody's like, tells you something about how I feel, doesn't it? But if you say to me, oh, Darren, you look like you might be something up today. How are you doing? If it's somebody that I don't know well, what would I say? I'm fine. Okay. This is where we use spells to deflect people from the internal reality and truth. Do it all the time. I'm fine. No, you do not get to see how I feel. No, I'm not going to connect with you. So if you're somebody that I don't know, I might accept that because we're British, we're polite. I'll be like, oh, even when I know they're not, that's all right. Yeah, we're going to be in the fine department. But if it's somebody that I know, I might not accept that. I might be like, don't give me that. I can clearly see there's something going on here. Let's talk about it. So we've got this backup indicator when we're dealing with emotional matters that mean that even if I haven't come to terms with it, then we can kind of get along and work out what's going on. But when we get to the mind and beyond, it changes. So when we talk about things which have no emotional or physical substance unless we give it to it, philosophy, existentialism, morality, law, these have no emotional and no physical component unless we give it to it. So, just say I want to talk about politics or philosophy. What is the support to help you see the point that I'm making if I really don't know entirely what I'm talking about that well? There is no support. You'll be fooled by my conviction. You'll be fooled by my belief rather than what actually is, because the person really isn't indicating that much. So we have this issue in a lot of spiritual growth work where people say, when we start to have larger experiences, people are like, words don't matter there. Words don't matter there. It's fine. And we've replaced an effort to express with what I call the knowing nod. The hand on the knee and the knowing nod. Don't strive for the words. We've all been there, it's all right. Have we? How do we know?
Yeah.
Unless we've come to terms with it, it's like healing work. I've been to so many shows over the years where, there's like 20 healers there. 0 point healing, G point healing, quantum healing, bloody blum healing, whatever it is. And then I'm going to speak to the people. And they'll be like, you guys sound like you're working with really similar stuff here. But there's no shared terms. And for me, the failure of the so-called New Age is the failure to agree terms.
Yeah.
The failure to agree terms. The failure to come to a common agreement on anything. Anything at all. A shared term. Anything. So, because we don't really know how spelling works, we don't know how to use it to refer to those places well. That doesn't mean we shouldn't bother trying. It means we need to look at the tools that we're using. But for me, what happens is the opposite of what we are told is true. And that is, our choice of words are even more important. The more removed from the physical we get, where we can use other support structures to help make our point, the further away from that we get, the more important our spell choice is. Because of how easy it is to, not get the point at the end of the day. To not get the point. And the thing is, it doesn't take long for meaning to change over generations. So for those of you who were at one of the earlier talks, you'll know that one of the things that got me started on my journey on gender was realising that as a boy growing up in the world, that I'd been told this story of patriarchy, but when I looked at my experience, I was like, well, there's places I can't go unless I wear these clothes. And if I look at the part of these clothes, what are they called? And what I'm talking about is stuff I would have to wear to go to work and to go into certain restaurants and stuff like that. And I'd be like, well, I'd have to wear, shirt, tie, trousers, whatnot. But then I'd be like, well, what's this part around the neck called? It's called a collar. And this part around the wrist is called the cuffs. And then I'm like, well, who wears a collar and cuffs? Who wears a collar and cuffs? And in our language, in our culture, slaves and prisoners. Or BDSM. And I don't see much of that going on in the workplace. And actually what we have across the so-called civilized world is the same system of collared men. Blue collar, white collar, dog collar, all the police are known by their collar number everywhere. Everywhere. And no matter where you research, you will not find the origins of the collaring system. But what's interesting to me is, that's just a minor detail, what's interesting to me is, even though it's a big spell point, is that how many of us thought nothing of it? Staring at us our whole lives with clear and obvious language of slavery and symbology around us, but because it's made of fabric, we're like, hey, I'm getting a new silk shirt, looks great. Oh, look at his nice collar and cuffs. Oh, they look tidy, he must be posh. It's like, yeah, celebrating, the best bit of ironware going. But my point is, it didn't take long to move the meaning of collar and cuffs to being what it is to something that it's not. Didn't take long. There's another one that goes, another little spell that stares all in the face all the time. And that is you're going into shops, going to the shop, And shopping is all based on glamour. And glamour is a combination of light and sound and imagery to make something appear like it is more than what it is. So that's why shops are filled with the promise of satisfaction and reward. And then you come away and you're like, it wasn't it. I'm pretty sure the offer was not what I got, but maybe that's just me. That's what the point is. So over the door, there's a sign that you're told means way in. But it doesn't say way in, it says entrance. But entrance isn't a word. That's not what that word says. That is a spell where you've been tricked with a slight hint on phonetics and never spotted it. But it's always and only ever said in trance, which is exactly what goes on in those establishments. And the exit at the end is the wee end of that spell. And how many of you go in for a pint of milk and come out with 3 bags? Because it works. You know, it works. And these are everyday spells that's been staring you in your face your whole life, and you didn't see what it meant. And they're really superficial. And where we're going today is the other end of the spectrum, to the deepest, the most pervasive, and the most impactful, which we'll get there in a minute. Do check my notes. So what you can have over time is the word remains the same, but the meaning changes, like collar and cuffs. Or you can have it the other way around, where the spell remains the same, but people's phonetics change it, and people start to not even see what characters are there anymore. They don't even see what they're looking at. I mean, every one of you have seen the words of collar and cuffs your whole life. And it just shows how easy it is to get locked into a different context from what's staring us in the face. And so my little point is, if you've seen collar and cuffs your whole life, and you've seen the word in trance your whole life, and it's caught you by surprise here today to hear that, what else may you have missed that has been staring you in your face your whole life? Possibly a lot. Because every spiritual book is true in that it says everything you need is staring us in the face. But look at how many of you have ever gone looking for something and you're like, I can't see it, I can't see it, I can't see it. And then you go back and it's like it was right there. Anyone experienced that? Yeah. Who knows how and why that works? It's just a quirk of our awareness. Anyone played the kids' game Dobble? That game is exactly that. It's like a pattern matching game. You've got like these discs with pictures on it, and it's all about who can get a match on their card and the centre card first. And it's mind-boggling how often everyone can be staring at their own cards for minutes and not seeing it, but every card has a match, and it's like, staring at it, can't see it. So, there's many things like that. Okay, moving on. Right, what is this? I can't even read my own notes. I scroll these just before coming in here. Right, one more point, then we're going to get on to the spells, promise. Right, so the last point is about different types of spell. So, chair. It doesn't matter how worked up I am, how charged, how anything, using the spell chair is never going to achieve much, is it? Oh, chair! You chair, you! It's chair. Not much is really going to happen from that. Because chair has only really objective existence. But what about when we're using spells which have more than objective existence? Like love. Spell of love. I can talk about how I love cheese. How I love my children, my partner. It's not the same love. Or if it is, there's a problem. But there's a big difference between how I might talk about, oh, I love that. Loved that series, that was great. Loved that movie, that was awesome. Compared to a moment of genuine connection with another human being and transferring the sense of love through that spell. Quite different, aren't they? Very different. This is about the importance of alignment when it comes to spelling. And that is, when you are dealing with things which have more than objective existence, possibly a pervasive existence in the universe, like something like love, then our ability to come into alignment with it is paramount in us being able to achieve the spelling effect, to let somebody know we love them. Have you ever had somebody say, I love you to you, and it just felt like it was off the cuff? Oh, I love you, love. Yeah, love you. Not much in it, is there? Compared to those moments of intimate connection. Hugely different, aren't they? And the key difference isn't the spell, it's the same word. It's your alignment in the process. So the bigger the spell is, the more important alignment is, for that to be conveyed and shared. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And again, even when we were talking earlier about spelling effect, as in what's affected you, you know, if we think back to things that might have been said to you as a child, there's a big difference between a parent saying, "Oh, you stupid thing. That was a bit daft. And you stupid child." Bit different, aren't they? Same words, but in one of them, there's been a different alignment set up, different charge going on there. I've charged my spell up, and all of a sudden, the spell changes. Its effect hugely. So alignment is a big factor. So as these are all little important breadcrumb trails to be seeded in you all before we start to go and look at the big spells. I tried to say that in an ominous way. Did it work? The big spells. Right. I need to remember to try and write in a way that I can read later. I just feel like I'm looking at those tablets I was talking about earlier where there's some squiggles on here. Is there any meaning in here? Okay. Yes, let's do it. So there's a few leaps in this talk, and this is one of them now. So there's a nuance in our spelling that there's only 2 exceptions to. Allegedly 2 exceptions. In truth, there's only one. And that is, remember I was saying how spells all point something out? Yeah? They do something else at the same time. And that is they exclude everything else. They exclude everything else in the entire universe. Exclude it all. It all collapses. All of it. All existentialism, all love, all philosophy, all knowing, all time, all space, all distance, collapse when we appraise the cup. Or whatever it might be. Whatever the point might be that we're going to dwell on. As soon as we choose to dwell on a point, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, doesn't matter. It naturally excludes everything else. And that's how humans get lost. We get lost in our own ideas. We get lost in tunnels of poor feeling. We get lost because we can't see the other options anymore because of what we're dwelling on. It's a side effect of spells. You can't avoid it. Unavoidable. Becoming aware of it is helpful so we can start to try and defixate ourselves when we notice ourselves dwelling and we start to feel our options collapsing and we start to feel our vision and our hope collapsing. If you experience that and things are collapsing and you're only able to see 1 or 2 terrible things, or maybe 1 or 2 great things, but if it's 1 or 2 terrible things that are weighing you down, then be aware this is what's happening, is you're dwelling on particular points. And this quality of spelling is causing everything else to collapse around you, when in truth you have the power to open it all up. Because in any moment, all spells can either make the world more inclusive, expansive, and open. They can be revealing and enlightening. But they can also do the other. They can be constraining, detaining, misleading. And you've got to watch what you're doing to yourself. What you're spelling to yourself. Because it's so easy to get yourself in a low loop. And it is actually self-inflicted. And being aware in this way of starting to look, this is the mind itself doing it. And then it's having some emotional effects. Or maybe your mind is reacting to certain feelings or sensations. It doesn't matter which way around it is. This is about self-awareness, becoming aware of what's going on in your own process. So there are 2 exceptions that I say to that rule of exclusion and highlighting something. The first exception is allegedly, do you say allegedly? It's allegedly the word God and all its variants in any equivalent language, because it is supposed to refer to everything at the same time. Agreed? It's supposed to point to everything. So the idea of deity is that it's in everything and it is everything, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So therefore, that particular spell is supposed to refer to everything at the same time, and to exclude nothing. Seem reasonable? Yeah? I can hear everybody's minds, I can feel everybody's minds, and you're like, yeah, but it doesn't. Correct, it doesn't. And that's because there's something wrong with that spell. The other one, the other way around. God. Yeah. It does, that's true. And to me, it doesn't matter at this point. So monotheism or pantheism doesn't matter at this point. Where, so if we allow for, say, the pantheons to basically cover all bases, in most pantheons that I've seen, they generally cover all bases that monotheism tries to encompass into a singular figure or entity. To me, it doesn't matter, because by the end of this talk, we'll be dismissing all of them. So whether you're a pantheon or a goddess, it doesn't matter. They're all flawed. They're all flawed, every one of them. We'll get on to why in a moment. It's so funny because I know how mentally taxing this talk can be, and I can just feel everybody's minds right now, and I'm like, oh, should we have a break, or are you all right? Should we carry on? Should we have a 5-minute break? Are you all right? Yeah, should we have a break? Yeah, 5-minute break, 10-minute break? Let's do it, and then we'll get on to the word when we get back. Because this is really deep in the psyche, and there's no way, and your minds have followed the points up until now. This is like mental yoga. You've just gone to a class and you're like going, what? This aches. That's fine, I'm used to it, I expect it. Let's reconvene. What, 10-2, is that okay? 10-2.